We depend on nature, agriculture depends on nature.
We always have to make ourselves more honest about the real problems in the agri-food system.
It's a good direction we're heading.
And that is somehow missing in the discussion.
Soil health and regenerative agriculture is not just a sort of nice to have. I think it is a critical answer to climate adaptation.
We're here at the Regenerative Agriculture Summit Europe, which gathers together leaders across the agri-food sector to figure out how can we produce food more sustainably and at scale, to listen in to conversations on and off stage and really find out what's going on in the sector and what do leaders here think needs to be done to make the transition happen. What do you think about the state of where we are in the regenerative agriculture transition? And are the conversations happening here, the conversations that need to happen?
The state at which we're at, I think, is very diverse. So, for example, even in Europe, in Germany, we are super far behind. In France, amazing stuff is growing. Same, look at Brazil, innovation, farmer-led innovation there, and then compare it to some state of conventional agriculture in Italy. The spectrum is huge. I think the discussions that are happening here can help. I don't think they set us back in any way. At the same point also, we always have to make ourselves more honest about the real problems in the agri-food system, how we got into here, market concentrations, oligopolies, where's antitrust law, and so forth. The political economic debate of the Regen Ag movement in particular, I suppose, is relatively weak right now. So we are not brave in talking about antitrust law to actually, at the top of the chain, deconstruct the oligopolies of the food retailers so that we can, again, not talk about some minor premiums we pay to farmers, but turn around the real trend, which is in the 70s, farmers got about 50% of what we people spend on food. Today it's more around 11%. And those margins, they stay somewhere where there's no use value produced for society, but just surplus value siphoned off of the monopolies that have created the powers to do so.
What is the value in your mind of working at landscape scale? So looking at, let's say, a watershed instead of just individual farms for transitioning the agri-food sector?
Yeah, so I think regenerating agriculture at its heart should be about regenerating democracy, about re-indigenizing ourselves. And that has two facets. A, deconstructing terrible stuff like patriarchy, gerontocracy, and our social ills. And at the other end, of course, regenerating our ecological movements. And this we can only do if we do it connected to the land and the people of our context. So I think it's super powerful because I believe if we are really regenerating, we have to reweave our democracies from below.
Usually, we miss farmers in this kind of event because they are the key actors of the transition, because they are the one who will deploy practices on the field, and they are the one who are facing problems, technical problems, economical problems.
Why do you think it's difficult for farmers to have a conversation with directors? What's the missing link?
I think their day-to-day works are very different, and sometimes it's difficult for everyone to understand each other. Maybe a farmer will be focused on economical problems, a problem on the field, and so on. And sometimes it's just a problem of culture, can I say culture, and a way of communicating together. Sometimes they don't understand each other, and it's one of our key actions on the field to facilitate the communication between industrial partners, for example, and farmers. Because it's not the same way of communicating, it's not the same problems. And so we help our clients to understand the farmers' reality and problems and so on, and how to solve them.
There's a question of language. They need a common language to speak.
That's it. And they need, I think, to know each other. better. I already.
We completely agree. We actually also work on this issue.
Farming by nature is super intensive and not necessarily directed by your own schedule, but by a schedule of nature and farming.
Of course. And as a farmer yourself and as someone who works with a lot of farmers, for you, what is the value, let's say, of like looking at landscape scale? So looking at the broader ecosystem and working at that level, or at least conceptually at that level, rather than only thinking about your own farm?
Yeah, I think what is really important is like to integrate wildlife habitats, kind of that we provide corridors where we merge natural landscape and hopefully very diverse landscape with farmlands, that we don't need to distinguish in such an extreme way anymore. So with buffer strips, for example, or hedgerows, but that it's when you look into the ecology of things, like hedgerows, for example, are called the highways for insects, and it's so cute, right? And actually that's what you want, that they can travel around. And I think that is there are many nice practices in Regen Ag, and to apply them on a bigger scale, that is what I think is hopefully going to happen, and more farmers are doing that, which is great.
Why do you think there's not enough farmers in the room here? Do you think it's from the corporate sector, or is it just because farmers don't have time? Like, what is the issue that's sort of keeping farmers and the other players not in conversation?
There are unfortunately quite many constraints in that sense, like farming by nature is super intensive and not necessarily directed by your own schedule, but by a schedule of nature and farming.
Of course.
What we see with agriculture, I think, across Southern Europe is a very real concern about resilience. And I think that's very pronounced in almond supply chains because of the sort of broader macro dynamics of California production. Groundwater depletion, I think, is sort of catching up with California to a degree. We've sort of seen, I think, orchard in about 2021 in California, and we're seeing year-on-year reductions of bearing acres there. So, there's a real sense in which it's a shifting moment in the almond supply chains globally. But I think that, for those brands that are either already purchasing almonds from Europe or think about diversifying away from California production, it's really a case of how do we make sure that we have robust, resilient supply chains long into the future, and that ultimate awareness that soil health and regenerative agriculture is not just a sort of nice to have. I think it is a critical answer to climate adaptation. And the one final thing that I always find interesting is that, when you plant an almond tree, it's a 25-year sort of prediction of the future, to be honest, right? That's how you amortize costs when you plant an almond tree. So the farmers that we're working with, the funds that we work with who own almond farms are inherently engaged in the sort of 25-year timeline of agriculture in Southern Europe. And so I think resilience is a sort of shared concern across the board.
For you, what's the value, especially for almond production, of working at landscape scale?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's amazing examples of landscape scale projects like what Common Land are doing with Alma is very pioneering. I think something that we are sort of working on and are really interested in is really engaging at a sort of irrigation district level. I think that's kind of inherently landscape level or basin level. And I think there's real opportunities there to sort of build a sort of shared narrative about water as a shared resource, thinking about responsible water usage as something that affects everyone. Again, understanding that there are going to be growing pressures on that resource and putting in place effective mechanisms for responsible water usage, relevant for almond farms, relevant for the other farmers within an irrigation district, and ultimately has come through for populations, governments, etc. So yeah, definitely water and almonds is a sort of well-known story, but we think that has inherent kind of basin level implications.
It makes sense. So kind of going from the other way around, like going from the sector and moving into landscape.
The question is always who's going to pay for it. Big corporates, they need to start, paying for it because of the risks they're going to need to manage in the future. because of climate change impacts and everything. But we know this is the future. I mean, we need to turn into regenerative agriculture, and we cannot do something else. We cannot stay with the traditional methods, of course.
There's no way out,
No,
let's say, and everyone
there's
has to pay for it across the supply chain.
As a farmer, you are in the middle of massive powers. On one side, on the supplier side, and the other side of your client side. These are all massive consolidated powers, and it's difficult for farmers to find their way and their voice. So I wanted to listen how they speak and to find the right answers with the farmers, to work with them, but also empower farmers to really understand their side of the story. And that, I have to say, this conference really is able to do.
Okay, so you think that they're hearing the farmer voice, they're bringing it in the room enough?
You hear from the beginning of every session is farmer first. How many farmers are in the room? Not so many. It's an old feeling that farmer first is discussed as the main principle, and very few farmers' voices are heard. Of course, farmers are busy. It's an incredibly difficult time right now. The profitability of farms are way down in entire Europe. So I don't think there are many who have time to be here to listen. But I'm happy I can, that I'm in a position to do that and to learn, and hopefully that it rubs off to something better going forward. The real challenge is here and now is that farmers cannot farm profitability. And to move into regenerative ag, in the beginning for sure, and I think also long term, it costs money and effort, adds complexity. And if there's no business model on the other side to compensate for that, it's incredibly hard. Farmers will move, they will work with nature if they can make money with it, otherwise they can't.
What for you is the value of taking a landscape approach in terms of the transition to regenerative farming? What does it offer farmers, and how can it also benefit businesses at the same time?
I think the main thing is that you're not alone. Farming, as I also have learned, can be incredibly alone, and you have to sort everything out yourself. And the answers are on landscape level, because the answers are never within the boundaries of one farm. It is how nature works, how society works in the landscape level. And you cannot find it out yourself as a farmer. You can find it out together if you stick all the experiences together in one community and one effort. So I think not being alone and finding ways forward to solve the massive challenges of our farming system, I think that's the value of landscape approach.
All right, thank you so much.
So we've had some very interesting conversations today with a diverse range of voices, and we've seen several insights coming through. One is obviously this need for everybody from farm to fork to be involved in the room, their voices heard for the transition, and also for everybody to pay. So not just consumers and farmers, but corporates needing to step up and actively invest to take their weight. Another insight we're seeing is a need for a common language, a need to bring all stakeholders in the room with different interests and get them to speak the same language so that they can actually support rural communities and supply chains to transition across the board. Another thing that we're seeing is the value of a landscape approach. So we've had several actors talking to us about the need to look at that watershed level or look at the ecosystem level, and remember that farms, while they might be productive areas, are also part of a natural ecosystem, right? We had one actor talking about hedgerows and thinking about those biodiversity corridors and how we can have landscape connectivity for regenerative agriculture. So as we're ending the day, we're still asking questions, we're still not there yet, but we're curious. So what do you think we need to accelerate the food and farming transition in Europe?